Today I'm going to teach you how to get tension on every single page of your novel, so stick around. What's up guys, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. Last week on the channel I did a video on hyperbole, or how you can use exaggeration to make your writing leap off the page. And everyone who saw that video on hyperbole knows that it was the greatest video in the history of recorded film. So now this week I'm feeling a lot of pressure, I gotta follow that thing up, and I figured that the best way to do it was to give you a technique that can help you put tension on every single page of your story. Now that might seem like a pretty big promise, like how are you going to get tension on every page? Because you might be thinking to yourself, well, tension, isn't that like when you have like a character with a knife to their throat, or there's gunshots going off in the darkness, or there's other kind of dangerous things going on? And yes, those are certainly examples of tension and they can create some really tense moments, but there is a much easier way to get tension on any page regardless of whether there's high stakes action going on. All you need to do in order to get tension on the page is have internal conflict, or more specifically, conflicting emotions within your point of view character. So for example, you might have a character who is feeling contentment, but also they're struggling with guilt over something. You might have a character who is excited about something, but also dreading something at the same time. You might have a character who's feeling depressed, but also hopeful. You might have a character who's happy, but also nervous, like somebody maybe going on a first date with someone they admire. Those kind of things can create tension, and whenever there's tension, your readers will be engaged. They will want to know how that tension gets resolved. What is going to happen next? And that is what you want on every single page of your book. It might sound like it's asking a lot, but let me give you some examples. I'll show you how it can be done. So for the first example, this is one that I came up with on my own, and it's just a very basic paragraph, and the first time I'm going to read it with only one emotion, and then I'm going to rewrite this paragraph with a second opposing emotion. So pay attention to the difference between the two paragraphs. So here's the first one. Amy pulled out of the driveway, excited to pick her son up from school. She sped down the road, made 2 right turns, and entered the parking lot. Soon as her son reached the car, he grinned and held up a sheet of paper with a big red A+ across the top. So that's a very boring paragraph. You might even need to be hospitalized right now after reading that. But the reason why it's so boring is because there's zero tension here. There's only one emotion, just that excitement of the mom seeing her son after school. There's nothing there that adds conflict or tension to the scene. Now, what we can do, we can rewrite this, and what we'll do is include an opposing emotion in order to add that tension that we need. So here's the rewrite. Amy pulled out of the driveway, excited to pick her son up from school. She sped down the road, made 2 right turns, and dreaded the thought of having to ground him yet again. Every time she disciplined him for getting bad grades, he grew more distant and seemed to side with his father. That only made this custody battle more of a nightmare. She entered the school's parking lot and held her breath. Soon as her son reached the car, he grinned and held up a sheet of paper with a big red A+ across the top. She exhaled, hoping that he didn't fail one of his other tests. So this rewrite is much better. It's much more interesting because it clues us in on this character's thoughts, and we see that the character is dealing with internal conflict. If you notice, I didn't change any of the action in this scene at all. She's still just driving into the school and picking her son up. But the internal things that are going on in her mind, the conflict, the 2 different emotions of excitement and dread are what makes this second paragraph much better and much more interesting. Now I want to take a look at a couple examples from a book called Harry Potter. I don't know if you've heard of it. I've talked about it on the channel before. It's about this wizard boy who goes to a wizard school. He learns some magic tricks, makes some friends, has a lot of fun. It's a good time, but surprisingly, he doesn't actually go to the wizard school until about the 25% mark of the story, which kind of makes you wonder, well, man, it must be a real slog getting through the early chapters of the book. But that's actually not the case because there is tension on every page, and I'm going to show you some of these early chapters. So let's take a look at the very first page of chapter 2. I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to pay attention to the different emotions present in this opening page. Nearly 10 years had passed since the Dursleys had woken up to find their nephew on the front step, but Private Drive had hardly changed at all. The sun rose on the same tidy front gardens and lit up the brass number 4 on the Dursleys' front door. It crept into their living room, which was almost exactly the same as it had been on the night when Mr. Dursley had seen that fateful news report about the owls. Only the photographs on the mantelpiece really showed how much time had passed. 10 years ago, there had been lots of pictures of what looked like a large pink beach ball wearing different colored bonnets. But Dudley Dursley was no longer a baby, and now the photograph showed a large blond boy riding his first bicycle, on a carousel at the fair, playing a computer game with his father, being hugged and kissed by his mother. The room held no sign at all that another boy lived in the house too. So this opening paragraph of chapter 2, it doesn't have much action going on here. It's not doing a whole lot to move the story forward. It's just recapping what happened in the past 10 years. And in the hands of a lesser writer, this paragraph would be a total bore. But thankfully, J.K. Rowling knows how to make it interesting. She includes two conflicting emotions here. She includes love and misery, and she plays them off one another. So early on in this paragraph, we get the sense that Harry's miserable because we sense that the Dursleys are not doing anything to accommodate him at their house. And then later on, toward the end of this paragraph, we see that the Dursleys are capable of love. In fact, they shower love upon their son Dudley. They take pictures of him riding a bicycle, playing a computer game with his dad, and they're hugging and kissing him. And meanwhile, oh, by the way, Harry Potter, it's like he doesn't even live there. So there's a clear sense of misery versus love, or love versus misery, however you want to look at it. And that's what makes this paragraph work. That's what makes us engage with this story and sympathize with the character. Now let's jump ahead to the first page of chapter 3. And again, I want you to pay attention to the conflicting emotions that work throughout this page. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started, and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and, first time out on his racing bike, knocked down old Mrs. Figg as she crossed Private Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Piers, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid, but as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. This was why Harry had spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he would be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. So this opening page of chapter 3 contains two conflicting emotions, hope and despair. We see them right from the get-go. The opening sentence gives us despair. We see that Harry's facing his longest ever punishment, but there's hope because he eventually gets out of his cupboard and it's the summer holidays. He's glad that school is over, but then again, there's also despair because Dudley and his gang are beating up on him every single day. And then there's hope again because, oh, okay, by the way, at the end of this summer holiday, he's going to be going to secondary school and he won't have to deal with Dudley anymore. So there's this back and forth between the two conflicting emotions. It's all internal. There's not a whole lot of action going on here, and it's not like the story is moving forward at a rapid pace, but it's interesting because we get this internal conflict. So the important thing to remember is that you can include tension in any type of scene out there. It doesn't matter whether it's a summary scene or an action scene or a description scene or a dialogue scene. It could be a sex scene or a violent scene. It could be just describing the weather. As long as you find a way to include internal conflict, include those two conflicting emotions, as long as you find a way to get that on the page, you will create tension in your story and you will be able to keep your readers on page after page after page until you get to the end of the story. Now, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about this, I would recommend checking out Donald Moss's book, The Fire in Fiction. One of the chapters towards the end contains a lot of this information on writing these types of scenes where you have all these conflicting emotions and how you can pull them off. So check out this book. I'll link it in the description below. So I hope this helps. Question of the day: in the most recent scene you've written, are there two conflicting emotions? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. I'll feel real conflicted if you don't. Also, be sure to check out my other videos, hit the like and subscribe buttons for me, share this video with a friend, and as always, remember to keep on writing.